Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I've heard you calling in the night. And I will go, Lord, if you lead me, and I will hold your people in my heart. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Mayon, and I serve as the Intergenerational Minister at College Avenue in Muncie. I've served in this capacity for the past 22 months, but as I look back, I've spent a lifetime preparing for it. You see, I had the good fortune of being raised in a family where both my parents loved God, and together we worshiped every Sunday. My parents were involved in many ministries, and it seemed only natural to do the same in my age group ministries. During my college years, my friends and I worshiped in many different denominations, and that created the opportunity for me to compare and to contrast our practices and our beliefs. After college, I accepted a position as a juvenile probation and parole officer in my hometown of Reading, Pennsylvania. Now, my father told me if I took this position, I would never want to have children. But he was wrong, because instead, I couldn't help but wonder how each child's life might be different if they had experienced God's love the way I had. And so from these children and their families, I learned how to work with diverse populations. The following year, I married and moved to the Washington, D.C. suburbs, leaving behind my church and my family, my job, my friends, and the city in which I had been raised. But I was very excited to accept a position with the National Security Agency, because there I learned how to gather information and how to report it quickly and efficiently, and it was exciting work, and I loved it. Now, 6 years later, my husband completed his graduate studies, and he accepted his dream job at Ball State University. We're moving where? I asked him. And so once again, reluctantly this time, I said goodbye to my job and to my friends and to my family and to my church and to the city that I learned to love so well. Now, I'm not very proud to tell you that it took me a week to unpack my first suitcase. But I am proud to say that Muncie very quickly became home, because within a month, I found a new job working in the library at Ball State. And I found a new church family at College Avenue. I made new friends, I celebrated the birth of a child, and then I went on to earn a master's degree, and I spent 16 years working in libraries. Now there I learned how to develop and to present programs, and how to supplement a staff with wonderful volunteers. I also spent some time fundraising, and I learned to successfully write grant proposals and to ask others to financially support the programs for which I had tremendous passion. Along the way, though, a few things happened that changed my world. And the first occurred 15 years ago when I went on a walk to Emmaus. Now, I grew up singing, "Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so." But during those 3 days, that message moved from my head to my heart as I experienced God's love in ways I could have never imagined. Well, I wanted to share that love with others, and so I went on to work numerous walks, finally serving as the lay director in the spring of 2007. However, just a few months before that walk, my family and I were involved in a very serious car accident. And so while my body was broken, my soul was strengthened as once again I experienced the love of Jesus in ways I could have never imagined. Well, from these experiences, I started to ask myself, is God asking more of me? Am I fully using the gifts God has given to me? I was praying daily. I was worshiping weekly. I led committees. I participated in studies. I did all the things I had been taught to do. And yet the questions remained. Is God asking more of me? Am I fully using the gifts God has given to me? The answers came to me at several times and in several ways. And so it was 8 years ago that College Avenue no longer had a full-time campus minister, and I agreed to accompany 19 of our college students on a mission trip to Costa Rica. I believed I had the gifts to do so. I had previously traveled to Latin America, I spoke Spanish well, and I had a passion for campus ministry. And so while our students spent their time building sidewalks for the dairy cows in an orphanage, I stayed in the house where the babies and the toddlers lived. And so during their work breaks, our students had the opportunity to come to the house and to interact and play with the children and build relationships with them. And as a result, their mission experience was enhanced, and their stories took on a human element. Approximately 5 years ago, I was sitting in a worship service, and I looked around and I noticed a handful of children sitting with their parents. And I wondered, do these children know how much we love them and we value them as members of our church family? And do their parents know how much we want their children to be in worship services with us, wiggles and giggles and all? And I heard God calling me, telling me to do something to ensure that the answers to those questions was yes. And so I spoke with my pastor that day, and the following week I offered a children's message. And so now, our children know without a doubt that they are loved and they are valued. And there are more children in our worship services, wiggles and giggles and all. And it provides an opportunity for our oldest and our youngest members to come together and to receive and give to one another the gifts unique to each generation. Well, during this same time, I was participating in the Fruitful Congregation Journey process. We were reading and studying and discussing books on church growth. It became quite obvious that College Avenue needed an additional full-time pastor. But our finances were tight. And so we were encouraged instead to think about a layperson with the appropriate gifts, as opposed to an ordained clergy. And so I started to think, and I started to pray, and I continued to ask, is God asking more of me? Am I fully using the gifts God has given to me? Our congregation confirmed what our FCJ team suggested, and a full-time lay ministry position was created. Well, I was encouraged to apply by others who saw in me the gifts needed for this ministry. But how could I say no, how could I give up my job as a library director? And yet, how could I say no to God? After all, as I looked back, I am and always have been a storyteller. When I prepared a pre-sentence investigation for the court, I told a defendant's story. When I submitted an intelligence report to defend our national security, I told the story of covert activity. When I detailed the need for funding in a grant proposal, I told the story of a not-for-profit. I told stories when I sang finger plays with children and when I presented book talks to adults. I am a storyteller. And now I tell God's stories. So College Avenue has always been a multi-generational church, but we heard God calling us to be intergenerational, to bring together our generations, and to intentionally create opportunities to worship, to study, to serve, and to fellowship together. And so my job as intergenerational minister is to do just that, to facilitate those opportunities and to foster an intergenerational culture. And so while it may sound quite daunting, some days it is. However, the church family that loved me and encouraged me and ministered to me for more than 25 years has now embraced my call, and they continue to love me and to encourage me and to be in ministry with me. And while I continue to give the children's message every week, I also very quickly realized that God had been equipping me throughout my career with the gifts that I would need in this new ministry. And so week 2 on the job, and we learn of Lilly Endowment's Theological Exploration Initiative. This is a wonderful opportunity for campus ministry, and it beautifully ties in with our congregation's passions and its history. However, the letter of intent was due the next week, and if invited, preparing a full proposal would be an arduous exercise. But I knew how to write grant proposals. I had done it before. And so last fall, we learned that our proposal was fully funded. And this fall, we launched a campus mentoring ministry, helping students on the Ball State campus to better understand the relationship between their faith and their vocation. God equipped me for this call. As part of our intergenerational culture, we've embraced a culture of blessing. And so we started by offering a blessing at the end of the children's message. And the first week I introduced it by asking the children, what are you thankful for? And we had some great answers. And then one of my little friends told me he was thankful for chicken. Yes, I said, food is a blessing, and I know you feel especially blessed when that food is chicken. Well, the following week, I asked the same question. What are you thankful for? And this time, that same little friend told me he was thankful for his baby brother. He got it. At the end of the children's message, I ask each child to put up their hand. I make the sign of the cross on it, and I tell each child by name, you are a blessing. Well, do you know how wonderful it is to hear those words? You are a blessing. The children are filled with joy. You can just see it on their little faces. And so we tell our adults as well, as we conclude meetings and any time the Spirit moves us. Blessings are given by clergy and by laity, by adults and by children. And each time we do it, our cups are filled and overflow, and we share those blessings with others. God equipped me for this call. Well, this summer, I had the wonderful opportunity to return to Central America when I traveled with other members of the East District to Mission Guatemala. And I felt especially blessed to be able to communicate directly with the construction workers who guided our work, and with the cooks who prepared our meals, and with the adults and children in the community who openly shared their stories and their smiles. God equipped me for this call. Now, I've discovered that full-time ministry is exhausting, but it's also humbling, and it's a privilege. And while I am not an ordained pastor, I have been called to minister to others. And so sometimes I am simply present with someone when they face a very difficult time. And sometimes I practice holy listening as deepest confidences are shared. But through it all, I know that I am called, equipped, and affirmed by God. God has called me to do more. God has called me to full-time lay ministry. And by saying yes to God's call, I experience an inner peace that had previously eluded me. I am content in believing that I am fully using the gifts God has given to me. But God is not finished with me, because there continue to be struggles in my life and in my ministry. But I've learned that my struggles are fruitful, because it's in these struggles that I grow. And so as I continue to open myself to the opportunities presented to me, I'm developing new gifts that God may one day use in ministry with others. Here I am, Lord. It is I, Lord, and I've heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me, and I will hold your people in my heart. Amen.